welcome to another edition of Curious Rebel TV. I am Advita Patel, the founder of Comms Rebel. We help organisations revolutionise how they communicate through inclusive communication so the people that they work with can thrive in their job. Today, I am delighted to be joined by Clare Plant. Clare is the founder of People Happy Limited and is a HR expert and specialist. So Clare, I'm going to ask you to do a short intro to some of the folks who are watching us live today. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm excited to be here. So I run a HR consultancy now. I have worked in HR for the last 20 plus years. I started on a 2-week temping contract and it just seems to have expanded. I've worked across public, private, charity sectors, and that's where my home is now, very much within the charity sector and social organisations of social conscience. And I am a true generalist, I would say. So thank you for inviting me along.
No, thank you for being here. I love that you start off doing something temporary and then it ends up being kind of your permanent career.
Yeah.
I think most folks will resonate with that. I actually started my career in information technology, so IT.
Okay.
And then it just wasn't something that brought me joy at that time. So I ended up doing an admin job and then picking up a little bit of comms, whatever that was in those days, and then just fell into internal communication. And I think a lot of internal comms folks will say that. Now, obviously working in HR, you've worked with internal communication professionals. I was making a massive assumption there, but assuming that you have, in terms of some of the work that you're doing. And this isn't part of isn't part of our pre-chat thing that I wanted to do, but I've been asked a few times this week about relationships between internal communications and HR professionals. And I did mention the report to you, the Gallagher report.
Yes, you did, yeah.
About how 73% of internal communication professionals believe that employee engagement is that they're accountable for employee engagement, which absolutely threw me, because I was like, when did that happen? Like, we are definitely responsible for making sure that we're working closely with the HR team to communicate the survey, communicate some of the actions that come out of that survey, work with leaders to build confidence in how they may communicate some of the things that come out of that survey. But in terms of taking accountability for employee engagement, just feels a little bit, firstly unfair, and secondly, I just don't think it sits within just solely responsible for comms. And that'll be really interesting to get your viewpoint on what you think.
No, completely not at all. I've worked with big organisations in my time. So Guardian Group, Transport for Manchester, Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine, which have big comms teams in them. I would say that my experience is that they haven't been tight-knit enough, that there's a disjointed relationship often. Probably because of my levels within the organisations, maybe that happened at a director level, but not so much further down the channels. But no, I was surprised at those results about employee engagement completely. It must be a joint venture. It can't be down to anyone's responsibility, but I think ultimately leadership have to be both for employee engagement. I was wondering if it had been a shift from COVID and the change in people working together physically, whether that had kind of shifted the emphasis to the comms teams, maybe.
It's really interesting. It is. This might be just a community that I'm part of and the biases around me, but everyone I've spoken to is equally surprised about it. And I know when I started working at Manchester Airport, actually, I was the colleague engagement lead, but that was my specific role. My role was to work with HR team to help them communicate the survey, communicate the responses from the survey, the outcomes from the survey. But there was never any point in those discussions that accountability would sit with me. Which is where I just want to kind of, I suppose, great if folks are watching us live who have seen that survey or just heard this conversation. It'd be great to get your thoughts on whether you think there is too much overlap in HR and internal comms. Are we in danger? And I said in my newsletter actually that we might be in danger of making our role redundant almost in internal comms if we transition too much in people and HR roles and responsibilities. And you did say that it's important that we work well together.
I think the opposite could be true, actually, is that I think a lot of HR people could probably do with more guidance in that area, but don't necessarily know how to build that relationship themselves. So I'm just thinking of past examples. Like if you do a big project, you might go to a comms team and say, we want this sharing and how's the best way to do it. But actually, if comms were more interlinked in the strategic planning in HR and more kind of touch points regularly with not necessarily the higher levels, but the middle management and the talking about workforce planning and talking about projections for the future and trends and things, I think that would actually be really super beneficial to the HR teams. So I guess it's like educating us a bit more would actually be really beneficial, because we kind of like have the wider picture across the organization. But unless you're a HR leader who's in charge of like your client area is comms, you might not have the knowledge of how you can be useful and support your work. So I think that it's actually probably a underrated area of the teams. Like I think we discussed earlier in the week, didn't we? It's like HR, everyone thinks that they can do your job. It's just one of those.
It is. We do seem to work in that industry where there's experts in every other. We would never dare tell the finance director on how to manage the P&L accounts or how to predict the forecast. However, and I am stereotyping, most kind of leaders do believe that they can tell us on how to communicate or how to do HR in the way that they want to do.
I mean, we've got Google, so why would you need HR?
And now we've got ChatGPT that tells us all the answers as well. So who needs us? Ultimately. So funny. So you said there, it'll be really good to kind of build that relationship in terms of educating HR in understanding what are we there to do as internal communications? How can we support? What advice would you give to internal comms and to HR folks who are listening, actually, who have got maybe a tense relationship with the two departments? What have you got any advice or any guidance on the steps that somebody may take to build that trust and build that connection so we can do the education?
Well, obviously it depends on the circumstances, but I think it comes down to this in so many cases across engagement in organizations, but it's honesty. Like what are the tension points, and then what are our common threads to pull us together instead of repelling? Like everyone, I don't believe anyone comes to work thinking I'm going to do a bad job today or I'm going to be like really difficult with somebody. I don't think that they do that. But we can get quite protective of our own spaces and showing our value to the wider organization, where actually I think it's something that you see as a consultant, because you're not involved in the politics of an organization, that you can kind of see the overview of, well, actually, if we come together, we could be bigger and better as a team rather than individual sections. I think it comes down to having kind of an environment, creating a culture where you can have really open and constructively challenging conversations without it becoming a personal thing. And I think a lot of organizations aspire to that, but it's quite, history makes it challenging.
It can be hard. If I think back to some of the challenging relationships I've had, it's about being a bit more vulnerable with each other. And I will always kind of offer to take somebody for a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, and just have a real open conversation about, look, we're both in areas in the industry, are seen as human skills or soft skills, which I hate, but I'm using a Simon Sinek term of human skills, which we just clearly said at the start of this conversation that a lot of people think they can do themselves, right? So to your point, let's work together, let's collaborate, let's build a really strong relationship where we can support each other in rooms where we may be challenged and there may be some adversity and people may think they can do our job better than what we can do it. But if we did work brilliantly together and we support each other, HR own a load of data, they have the insight, they have the relationships with the leadership, internal comms have a frustration with line manager population because they sometimes are the gap, I suppose, or the barrier, I should say, in getting some information out to the wider workforce. But if you worked well with, your department and the HR business partners and HR leaders to understand how do we personalize some of our communications to these leaders who may be a bit reluctant, because you will have had those conversations with these leaders to understand what is their barriers, right? And what is...
exactly. And we'll know, we might not be able to openly talk about all of the issues, but we know the issues. And sometimes that can be the challenging thing in a HR role. You might know why somebody's got a problem with something. So we might know why there's a boundary with line managers, but we might not be able to talk about it because there might be something big going on that's confidential. And it's kind of like trying to find ways to get beyond that. And a lot of it is just relationship building. Like it really is. Like I said earlier, like I partly went into HR because I'm nosy. Like we know everything about people generally. Like that's, you know, people talk to us, and it's trying to like, I think focus on getting the best results and working like that. But I mean, who doesn't want somebody else in a room who will champion them? And if you can work collectively, that's where your power lies, in delivering anything. Like, definitely.
100%. I just think that if we were a little bit more open to building these relationships, as you said, you know, some of my best friends are HR directors, and we have some real good conversations about the barriers and the blockers in building these relationships. And you're so right, you know, sometimes it's just that I think sometimes we're pitched against each other in organizations. We're vying for attention because we don't get it, because they don't see the importance of the work that we do at times. We're kind of, you know, trying to build relationships ourselves with leaders, so we get land grab a little bit more, and we become a little bit protective of what we're doing, and we end up in this really uncomfortable situation where trust has depleted, and we're not really doing what we're meant to be doing because we're too busy fighting internally with each other about who owns what and who does what. But sorry, Claire, go on.
No. I was just agreeing. I was agreeing completely. And I think that's the element of certainly big organizations that can become really exhausting for individuals and leads to disengagement. And then, you know, you've had a silent quitting and turnover, and, you know, all the rest of it is because people don't feel valued, don't feel engaged, don't feel a connection to the delivery of the organization. But it's often really simple things that can stop that from happening. And as you say, like working together, like collaborative working, trust between departments is essential. And often that comes from the leadership. You know, you might find that lower down in the teams, a lot of people will socialize together or, you know, speak to each other frequently, especially if, I don't know, if you're working in recruitment and you're working with comms a lot in terms of advertising and recruitment strategies. The director level might be quite different to that. It's more project, a bit more fractured. But yeah, I think it's got to be collaborative working approach. It's got to be the way forward. And sometimes just like putting your egos at the door, leaving them at the door a bit is what it is. But
there can be quite a few egos, can't they, flying around?
Always, yeah.
One of the books I found really helpful, and when I was writing my book, Trust, there's a whole chapter dedicated to trust, because it's so important in building cultures that are, you know, inclusive, that are accessible, that are safe as well, and also Speed of Trust by Stephen Covey Jr. And we'll share the links in in the comments for anyone who's interested. But I would highly recommend that you do check out some of those books if you're a little bit stuck in terms of how do I build this trust? What is trust? Like how can I get there and build this trust that's missing? Right, Claire. So you describe HR as focusing on the cultural identity of an organization. And this is something that I am just fascinated by. So ever since I dug deeper in cultural intelligence and cultural values and stuff. Do you want to tell me a little bit more about what do you mean by cultural identity and why should we care about it?
Oh, I think that's the big question, isn't it? But I didn't know I'd identified it as that. I'll have to have a look at my comms. I think cultural identity is just intrinsic to everything. And I think it's how we attract people to come and work with us. I think it's how we represent ourselves in the wider world. I think it's about how people feel about the organization. at every touch point. So not just people who work there, and it's your legacy.
Yeah.
But it has to be, I'm going back to the same word again, it has to be honest. It has to be transparent. And it otherwise you're living behind a mask as an organization. Like we, the whole, you find a lot of organizations where the culture is where we're diverse, we're transparent, we're inclusive, we have open door policies, which are all fantastic things to be, but you have to live them, and they have to be evident. And it can't be like, oh, we say that, but nobody will report issue of bullying because they're frightened of the consequences of it, or there's a culture of hierarchy or presenteeism, but it's not talked about. So one of the things that kind of I ask potential clients is about their culture, but about the practice of their culture. So what does that look like in reality? So a lot of leaders have aspirations for culture, but don't know how to implement it, or don't lead by example. So they will say, I want it to be really flexible. I want to encourage part-time working or working from home or whatever it is. And then they'll work until midnight every night and be emailing everybody at 10 o'clock. And because they're really busy and because they really care, like not from any kind of area of negativity or wanting to trick people, but just because of their workloads. But it creates a subculture of expectation. And that thing about if you want the next job, you have to emulate the person who's emulate the next step or whatever it is. If you see leaders who are working at emailing you at 4 a.m. or whatever it is, you're going to think that's the expectation, and that's how cultures are bred. I've certainly had that, and I've certainly had, if you're working late at night, I put on the bottom of my emails, just because I work strange hours doesn't mean you have to. I'm a consultant and I swap and shift around. But you will see, particularly junior members of staff, if you're emailing at night, they'll reply straight away. And so it makes you conscious of, right, I need to stop that or delay my emails or whatever it is. And that's just a little example of how it can impact, but that breeds really quickly. And I go into so many organizations with big HR teams who are really fantastic at what they do, but they're exhausted.
Burnt out. Most of them are burnt out. Completely. It's that continuous cycle of just churning stuff out without any real consideration about what value it's bringing. And I think, to your point, this culture that we breed, it's that Edgar Schein's iceberg model, right? With a famous iceberg model. Again, we'll share the link to that, where what you see on the surface of it is not really the culture. It's the stuff underneath that you don't really speak about. It's the unspoken rules, the beliefs that people have. And if you see a successful, in your world, in your mind, a leader who is a senior leader who seems successful, drives a nice car, has that big house, seems to have their stuff together, in your head, you think, oh my goodness, they're working like 18-hour days. They are on it all the time. They're working at weekends. That's, if I want to succeed like that, I need to replicate their behavior. And this is why we see this churn of same things happening time and time again in different generations. However, on that note, I would say, and it'll be interesting to get your point of view, the Generation Z, and I'm not the biggest fan of like generation psychology, because I do think there is, there's difference for everyone, right? But just generally, if you look at the data and the trends that right now, the Gen Z generation, so the 18 to 24-year-olds right now, are definitely, in my experience and from what I've seen and heard and other people's experience, are refusing to step into that cycle of continuous churn without any outcome or value for them. And some of them are stepping away from that traditional model of work. They're setting up, they've got several side things going on. They're entrepreneurs quite early on. They've got this like vision about what they want to achieve. And it's so different from when I started in the workplace, where we were being taught by Gen Xers and baby boomers who were so used to having that. You come into work, you show your effort, you keep your head down, you earn your stripes. Before you get your next promotion, you earn your stripes before you get next promotion. So you're 10 years in before you get to like director level. even longer for some people. But now, I don't think that's the case. A lot of the Gen Z folks are like asking for those 6 figures and saying that I know my stuff really well, and I'm coming across pretty confident in that stuff as well. Do you see this trend continuing in the workplace and the workforce?
I hope so. I think we've got a lot to learn, actually. I interview a lot of Gen Z candidates, and it's confidence. It is confidence and having boundaries. And you're right. I was brought up in the era of children are seen and not heard. Like that was definitely a thing. Like you should be respect authority, which it's fine. But I think there are different kind of spectrums of that. No, I love the confidence. I think we can all learn from that in terms of our own self-worth. And I think that is something that a lot of particularly women spend a lot of time unlearning the boundaries and restrictions of around self-confidence and self-worth, definitely. But I think the workplaces have to adapt to it, to the different kind of opinions and approaches. But I don't think that's a bad thing. I think generally the workplace has to adapt anyway. Like we were forced into it with COVID, which was one of the best and most challenging times in terms of employment. But it showed that actually the traditional isn't the only way to do things, and we can evolve, and we expect everything else to evolve around us, technology, culture, society, but the workplace should be evolving too. Like the set structures of the past aren't necessarily what is needed. But a lot of that, it comes down to management confidence and leaderships people in leadership roles having the soft skills that are often overlooked in terms of somebody being an expert in their area and getting promoted. Actually, the soft skills area of people management, line management, and communication are really essential to be able to grow the rest of the team, grow your culture, ultimately have a workplace that people really enjoy being at and feel that they can thrive and grow, but don't feel that they have restrictions in terms of what's the word? A lot of people feel like that if they outgrow a place, there's something wrong. And actually, really important. Everyone shouldn't outgrow their workplace. Like we are constantly evolving.
Well, that's how you progress, right? That's how you progress. That's how you grow. That's how you build a company, an organization, a business. You need people to learn, grow, develop, progress. That's what we're about as a culture, right? We need to be able to support these. Otherwise, how are we ever going to build leaders for the future to run these organizations if we don't give them that encouragement and support?
And gone of the days of leaving school at 16 and still be working at the same place at 65. That whole mentality is completely eradicated now.
Oh, it's gone. Yeah. Well, this is the thing, right? So when you the loyalty element, which a lot of people held on to, isn't as strong. I think people are still committed to the organization, don't get me wrong, but they are more committed to their own progression, their own boundaries. Am I actually being fulfilled? Am I getting joy? Do I enjoy being with these people every day? Like, are these people helping me be the person that I need to be for me to progress to the next steps? And when the answer is quite clearly no, there's no real, in some, I'm going to move on and progress and look for another opportunity. We're still in that kind of, in some generations, they're still in that mindset of what if, and that's where that confidence comes in, right? And I think a lot of leaders fear having that flexibility and having that agile space, because what if some people get above their station, right? Or what if some people, if I can't see them, then are they actually doing the work, or are they working 3 or 4 different jobs? And I will always say to leaders, like, why don't you look at what the outcome is? If the outcome is not generated to the level that you need it to be generated at, then you have that conversation about how do we make this work, team? Like at the moment, we've got a really flexible model about you working from home and you coming in when you need to. Mm-hmm. Right now, the results are showing that isn't working as effectively as we need to, because here's the data demonstrating that. So let's work together in coming up with a solution that helps the business thrive and grow, but also helps you as an individual. We just don't seem to be having those conversations. We're going out with these kind of big messaging about we need you in the office 4 days a week, 9 to 5, and there's no excuses and there's no extenuating circumstances. And it definitely is turning people off, because we're all adults in all of this, and nobody really likes to be dictated to in that way, especially when it's been proven that working from home is demonstrating that you can still run a business pretty successfully.
Well, a recent survey that I saw, I think it was something like 67% of candidates are looking for true hybrid working, and what they get is, as you say, oh, but you must be in the office 4 days a week, or but that again comes down to confidence in management ability and the ability to have open conversations without fear of things going terribly wrong. If somebody wasn't performing in the office, you would be expected to have those conversations.
Yeah.
So there is and you're not standing. Well, I would hope that nobody's standing over anyone's computer checking what they're doing. They could be on Google all day, like you just, it's just because somebody is physically there doesn't mean that they are engaged. But I think that is down to management training and giving managers, and it's not always their fault. If you are an expert in engineering and you get promoted to become a manager, you need the support to learn management skills. You can't just do it because you've got a bit more money. Like
the title, you're expected to know everything about management. It doesn't work that way. They need coaching, mentoring, support. They need to understand how to have difficult conversation, how to have performance conversations. What does helping a colleague thrive look like for you? You don't get, I just don't think that leaders, like senior leaders or organizations, really think about the challenges facing some of these line managers in that position. Oh my goodness, we're at 27 minutes, Claire, already. Can you believe it? That has flown by. Now, every week we ask our guests, the previous guest, questions. And last week we had the wonderful Leslie Woods, who was asked, if you could leave one thing behind, what would you like your legacy to be once you've gone?
Oh, that's a big one. I think I would like to leave in terms of organizations, I would like to leave the legacy of self-confidence in people believing in themselves and feeling like they can do things and they can achieve. Because I think that's what holds a lot of people and organizations back, is just their own self-promote. Like, we don't self-promote, especially, we are very
humble,
reserved group of people in this country. And so that would be my
That's so good. And as a confidence coach myself, that 100%, resonates with me and what my kind of purpose is, to give people that confidence, boost their self-esteem, give them the power to get out there and speak up for themselves and champion themselves so they get the best that they need. And I think a lot of folks don't do that for themselves, sadly, and are still in the era of, I need to just keep my head down. I just need to work hard. I need to prove my worth. And the life can just pass you by, I think, sometimes, and you don't often live up to the potential that you have. And that's what makes me sad. And so you saying that, I think that is brilliant. And let's hope there's more people like us and others who are encouraging those to push themselves and build their confidence so they can get what they need in their lives, right? That's the key thing. So what's your question for the next guest that we've got next week?
Okay, so I'm very keen on encouraging leaders to look after themselves, because they often don't. They're too busy looking after other people. So my question is, what is the one thing this year that you're doing or would like to do, is on your list, to look after your own well-being?
Love that. What a great question. And it's that, again, another critical factor for success, right? If you're not looking after your own well-being and mental health, then eventually you will burn out. And I have seen the impacts of burnout, because I used to work in a mental health hospital, and I worked there for 6-7 years working in comms. But going onto the wards and talking to some of the patients in these wards about what led them to be in that room, and some of them was burnout. Some of them hadn't looked after themselves. Some of them were working like 18, 19 hours. I met a lawyer who was incredibly successful in their career, and they just one day could not get out of bed because they didn't give any time for themselves. And so that is something that's very close to my heart as well. So brilliant question, Claire. Now, if people wanted to find out more about the work that you do and in terms of connecting with you, where is the best place for that?
Okay, so you can find me on LinkedIn, Clare Plant, or you can contact me on my website, which is peoplehappy.co.uk.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Claire, for being an absolutely fantastic guest. I could have spoken to you for hours more about these topics. Honestly, I love them. But no, thank you. And again, please do connect with Claire. We're going to share her details in the comments. And if you've got any questions after you've heard this talk, if you're watching on replay, then please do post them on the comments or whatever platform you're listening this chat to, because we do live stream on Instagram. We live stream on YouTube, and we also live stream on LinkedIn. And you can follow us on all those platforms by searching for the hashtag, the handle CommsRebel, and we'll be there answering your questions as well. So until next time, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Claire, and I'll see everybody else next week at 11:30 on LinkedIn. Take care of yourself. See you soon.